this morning is bright and sunny. What a difference that makes. My video is all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. My addictive substance, alcohol, my behaviour, equally addictive, work, relationships, collecting. A life run on self-will, because behind it was fear. And if you're ever driven by fear, you want to look right, you want to put a brave face on. Ego covers up that empty gap inside, or that concrete, mind-grippingly horrible feeling of fear. And I don't know how long that lasted in me, for years and years and years. Fear of being found out, not good enough, not part of, not included, not wanting people too close to me in case they found me out. Yeah, and it made me strive for perfection all the time. So if I looked right, you'd leave me alone. If I looked right, you might be attracted to me, if you're a girl, hopefully. And at the same time, this great big fear inside of not being right and not knowing what to do. So what did I do? Well, I found with alcohol, it took the edge off and it fixed me. It fixed me and made me able to experience feelings, normally at the extremes of behaviour. So extremely happy or extremely sad, but no balance. Something I saw as I swung by. There was no balance in the middle where emotions sort of erupt and go down, or as they are, as life affords. I was not very well calibrated as a person. So these days, simply learning one day at a time what it is to be balanced or calibrated one day at a time, so I can experience the feelings that are real about life. That's where I am today. So recovery for me means one day at a time finding out who I am, and by the end of the day having a bit of a better idea of what's worked and what hasn't. So life is about action, and we get wisdom from life experience. So my life experience over the last few years has all been about recovery and living life as it is, not wishing it different, not worrying about it particularly, unless it is of course a worrying moment. It's taking life as it is, on life's terms. So what's helped me? Well, a moment of clarity, after friends, family, community loved me enough to keep me alive. And then I said, I can't do it on my own. I cannot beat this. Whatever it is that I'm trying to get over, I can't beat it. And I then realised, when I studied it, that addiction is a disease. It's a disease of the emotions, as well as physical, when we're in the, I suppose, in the grip of not being able to get out of it. So it's taken a while to find sobriety, and what's helped me most along the way is the fellowship of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. So I share a bit about what it is, and some experience, strength and hope of what it's like to be in recovery. So this weekend has been a bit of an eye-opener. I fell over, hurt my foot, and I'm off to hospital later just to see what they say. Better safe than sorry, rather than soldiering on and wondering if it'll just get better on its own. So I've learned that. But you know, in the old days I persevere and end up spending, I don't know, time out, because I was so determined that I'd be alright regardless, and that's called denial. So I've learned a lot about denial. I still get it big time, and AA, the fellowship, helps me, and there's a statement of intent, or the AA preamble, shared at every meeting of AA, and I have 700 to choose from here in London every week, so I'm very fortunate. And this preamble reads like this: Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, nor be interrupted by the postman. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So it is about a desire to stop drinking and helping others, and that's really the backbone of what a fellowship can do, or what this fellowship does for me. And I share literature from this book, Daily Reflections, which covers the 12 steps of action for a person to take to improve their life circumstances and live life well. And they're encapsulated on this little card here. And as you can see, on one side here are the 12 traditions, and on the other side the 12 steps. And March is all about step 3 in this book, Daily Reflections. So it's 31 days on the third step. So I'm trying to cover, I love it because I can cover all the 12 steps fairly thoroughly each year, monthly, and get something out of it. So the third step reads like this: made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And when I first came into the fellowship of AA, this thing of God, I thought I had to know what God was, or is, or can be, or I had to define God in order to understand God so that God could help me. And what I've realised is that we all come to our own understanding about what God may be. And for me, and this is just me and my outlook, my understanding so far, because I'm a learner, and I'm an absolute learner on all of this stuff. God is truth. That's the universal truth of now, the universe as it is. God is love, and God works through people. So having come to that understanding, and that doesn't define God, because nobody can. You know, it's beyond everything. What is the universe? Beyond definition. So it will be very hard for me to define God, but you know, God works in people's lives. If we actually access the truth of now, have love in our hearts, and can learn from other people, that's good enough for me. And it's a good starting point on spiritual progress, which is living in the moment of now, being able to cope with what is going on. So March 1st, in this book, Daily Reflections, it says it works. It really does. When I got sober, I initially had faith only in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Desperation and fear kept me sober, and maybe a caring and/or tough sponsor helped. Faith in a higher power came much later. This faith came slowly at first, after I began listening to others share at meetings about their experiences that I had never faced sober. But they were willing, with the strength of a higher power, to face those. Out of their sharing came hope that I too would and could get a higher power. In time I learned that a higher power, a faith that works under all conditions, is possible. Today this faith, plus the honesty, open-mindedness and willingness to work the steps of the program, gives me the serenity that I seek. It works, it really does. And you know, for me, what is absolutely fundamental in there is recognise it. I'm not the higher power. That all that self-will and self-obsession to drive away the fear or push it down and push it out with alcohol, or just fix myself with alcohol, was always about not feeling good enough. So what has helped me? Well, faith, courage and confidence to be able to do the next right thing. And if I'm sober, I have a better understanding of what the next right thing or good conscience can tell me. So God, as I understand it, he or she, is simply truth, love, and comes through other people. Whereas before, it was all about me fighting the world and fighting a battle. And now I don't have to fight a battle. I can just be included, have choices, and be loved, and love back. Very simple. But because we're complicated, and we still want to be fixed, rather than just cover our needs and see what choices we have. If we cover our needs and have choices, the world opens up. But if we're wanting, we're narrowing our choices down to our own self-obsession. So that serenity prayer, which I share at the end of videos, to acceptance of now, goes as this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. For me, always, is just for today. Recovery from addiction. That's addiction either to substance or behaviour. My substance, alcohol, my behaviour, always trying to be perfect. workaholic, relationshipaholic, any sort of holic if you like, but never perfect, never ever so. I'm probably not following my true path, simply because I was drinking for most of my life, or for 35 years. And I guess if I crossed the line somewhere in my drinking, it was probably at the first drink, which changed my feelings and suppressed some and brought others out. Happiness, joy, love, and suppressed the other side of life. Not so happy, not so joyous, and not so loving. So I suppose living with rose-tinted spectacles part of the time. And these days I like to see life as it is in reality, whether it's good or bad. There is serenity in either. And what keeps me ticking along gently, a day at a time, is the fellowship of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't speak for AA, nobody does. It's a fellowship of people all the same size in their outlook when it comes to being sober. And we share a preamble at the beginning of every meeting, and it goes like this. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any set, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So the reasons why I do these videos is to share experience, strength and hope from me about how life is going along and how I am helped, if you like, with the fellowship. A bunch of people who stay sober one day at a time. One day only, that's what counts. But in time, we start to build up a bit of sobriety behind us, and we start to learn about the 12 steps of action for a person. 12 steps of action, changing attitude and behaviour to how to live, and how to live without drinking ciders. So, in one of the literature books, this one, Daily Reflections, it has one step a month. So January 1st step, February 2nd, and now March the 3rd step. And the 3rd step in AA. Do not be put off by the word God, by the way. It's the God of your understanding, not mine or anybody else's, or not God understanding. Just having a spiritual path, maybe, or just making a path of living in reality, without denial and without filters. And step 3 goes, made a searching and that's 4. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And for me, God is truth, God is good conscience, God is love, God works through people. So very, very nuts and bolts for me still. I'm still a newcomer to the idea or the concept of God. And I'm happy with where I've got to. So if God is about truth, the truth of now, that is also my spiritual connection, seeing the world as it is, truthfully, and without those denials or filters in the way provided by drink. And it's not about my way or the highway, it's about the way of life, a way of life, seeing life as it is, living it as it is, and living the experience to gain wisdom, to know what we can do and can't do. So can-dos and can't-dos, well, those are about choices, and so over the years I guess my choices have been better made, knowing the reality of now. So step 3 in the Daily Reflections, I want to just share first what it would have said for February 29th had there be one. And it says in this one, Daily Reflections, 1 AA miracle. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned, and at such times a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly he could not drink even if he could. God had restored his sanity. The word God was frightening to me when I first saw it associated with AA's 12 steps. Having tried all the means I could to stop drinking, I found that it was not possible for me to sustain that desire over a period of time. Yet how could I believe in a God that allowed me to sink to the deep despair that engulfed me, whether drinking or dry? The answer was in finally admitting that it might be possible for me to know the mercy of a power greater than myself who could grant me sobriety contingent on my willingness to come to believe. By finally admitting that I was one among many, and by following the example of my sponsor and other AA members in practicing faith I did not have, my life has been given meaning, direction and purpose. And for me, meaning, direction and purpose is not my meaning, direction and purpose, but just the way life is, what it means, what direction I may go in, having made some good choices. And the purpose is simply to live as best one can. So the concept of God for me is very, very robust, and it's about not being God myself, I guess, and then understanding that I need to see it through the eyes of others, good conscience, and to live well without filters and denials. And then for March 1st in this book, still, Daily Reflections, it works. It works, it really does. Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, page 88. When I got sober, I initially had faith only in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Desperation and fear kept me sober, and maybe a caring and/or tough sponsor helped. Faith in a higher power came much later. This faith came slowly at first, after I began to listen to others share at meetings about their experiences that I had never faced sober, but that they were facing with strength from a higher power. Out of their sharing came hope, and I too would and could get a higher power. In time I learned that a higher power, a faith that works under all conditions, is possible. Today this faith plus the honesty, open-mindedness and willingness to work the steps of the program gives me the serenity that I seek. It works, it really does. And for me, it's when we start to understand that life keeps on happening and that anything is possible if we are able to access the right choices as we go along. And for me, a higher power does not necessarily mean that I have some sort of golden protected coat or overcoat. It means that I can face life on life's terms, that I am open to anything that life offers. Like coffee, for example, to keep me awake. And for me, I did ponder a long time, because I suppose my background is atheistic, agnostic, not so sure about God, but when I actually look at the universe and what it is, how big it is, and that we are merely small parts in it, and not that significant in the big scheme of things, we can actually sort of right-size ourselves as human beings, get on with each other, deal with open, honest and willing, and understand that not everybody's ever going to be of the same opinion or in the same place. So within or without the fellowship of AA, we learn to get on with people. And I think that's one of the overriding and most important parts of the program, to be included and have inclusion. And in As Bill Sees It, this one, the reading which I'm doing linearly, membership rules, it says here. Around 1943 or 1944, the Central Office asked groups to list their membership rules and send them in. After they arrived, we set them all down. A little reflection upon these many rules brought us to an astonishing conclusion. If all these edicts had been enforced everywhere at once, it would have been practically impossible for any alcoholic to have ever joined AA. About 9/10 of our oldest and best members could never have got by. At last, experience taught us that to take away any alcoholic's full chance for sobriety in AA was sometimes to pronounce his death sentence, and often condemn him to an endless misery. Who dared to judge, jury, and be executioner of his own sick brother? And that is why in Tradition 3, when it says, for those who would like to be in the fellowship, there is only one thing, a desire to stop drinking. Stop drinking on a daily basis. And that's where it starts, and that's probably where it ends for many of us, that we get our choices back. So when I mentioned the Serenity Prayer, which is an exhortation to God, or good conscience, or whatever it is that you understand, not what I understand, just what you understand in terms of your faith in human nature, or God of your understanding. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It helps me calibrate me on a daily basis, so I know how I'm feeling, why, and what I may do, and when I'm with other people, how are we feeling, why, and what can we do. It all works if we work it in sober living. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And the reason why I'm saying good afternoon is it's a lovely sunny afternoon so far, and it's 20 to 2 in the afternoon, and I'm just back from my midday meeting of AA, which is held at Radnor Walk and is to move venue on the 28th of March to what is known as the Hut. The Hut in Alfred Place, just off Flood Street. And the reason why we're moving is because the Welsh Methodist Church, who own the building where we have our meetings quite frequently at Radnor Walk, is closing down for good. So all the meetings are moving to different venues, and goodness knows where the rest are going. I have no clue. But it was good to get there this morning. And last week I had to do a chair up at the top of Notting Hill, so not having to go uphill to do a chair and just be part of the general melee, if you like, of people going to an AA meeting is very satisfying, because it means I can concentrate on listening and absorbing and hearing what it's all about. And the Saturday morning AA meeting is often about spiritual matters, and sometimes read is the spiritual experience, which is one of the appendices to the big book of AA. That one, and it goes like this. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which, upon careful reading, shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different ways. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes, or religious experience, must be in the nature of a sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. It just means it's not actually the case. Very few people have a blinding spiritual experience in AA. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, following at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. And of course, spiritual and God consciousness don't necessarily go hand in hand. It really does depend on what we believe in. So it goes on to say, among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences of what the psychologist William James calls educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspecting inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, that these are indispensable. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Herbert Spencer. And for me, listening to the chair today and their understanding of how their life manifested no spiritual experience was when they were drinking, and relating it to me, because I can only speak for me. I can't speak for AA or another member of AA. I know that in my past, the amount of drinking I did really did quell any sort of spiritual understanding of what was going on in the world. And I remember in my teens understanding that spiritual really was living in the present moment and making the best of it, and being able to access the truth of what is now. So, and I suppose that comes from what my parents taught me. My father had a very good understanding of nature and providence, but he was not into organised religion, and certainly I never really knew what he thought about God. On the other hand, my mum was very much into the spiritual experience of living in the present moment, and I really haven't asked her whether she believes in God or not, and she is around to ask. I might do that tomorrow lunchtime when we meet up for lunch, and that will be with my sister as well. So in my world, I can remember being taken by a very dear friend all the way to Canterbury Cathedral, and this was just after I'd had a nervous breakdown, and I wasn't drinking, but I was still very much in denial about my life and where it had got to. Being there and thinking to myself, well, yes, I feel something, but I don't really want to feel it because it means I'm not in charge. And I don't know if I even articulated it in my head, because I was with somebody who was very, very God-conscious and had spent a lot of time working with people who were in hospices and were on their way out, and they helped them spiritually and also physically. So I guess in a funny sort of way, even though I was aware of spirituality and the presence of something greater than me, I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I didn't want it to be there, because I wanted my life to be my way and the way I wanted to live it. But I'd already had a big knock which said, you can't live like this because it's killing you. And eventually, after a period of time, I kept on drinking. And what I know today is that I was aware that there were ways of being helped, that my head, my intellect said I needed to do it my way, and my willingness was not there. I was not willing, I was not very honest, and I guess open, honest and willing. I wasn't open either. I wasn't open to any other way of living life but the way I'd learned. So I kept on trying to make the same thing happen again and again and again, and there was no way back to the life I had or the career I had. Not in this lifetime, because I've been broken. And when I say broken, permanently broken in some ways, which means that I realised eventually I could not drink anymore. And that was after becoming a 24/7 drinker a few years later, and realising I could never be the person I used to be. So in some ways that was a bit of a sadness. In fact, it left me derelict in every essence of me. And being a derelict, we just drift on. And I remember I did get to the gutter. I did become homeless, and life was completely unmanageable. And for anybody who ever gets to that state, I don't know how we get back on our own. It took me a long time to realise that I couldn't do it on my own, and that in the fellowship of AA, nobody was going to tell me what to do. People had suggestions which would help me, and the 12 steps of AA, well, I saw them on the wall on a great big banner, and I saw the 12 traditions on another big banner, and I could see intellectually what they were saying was true. At the same time, I had to give up my willpower to become willing and open and more honest about how to make life work again, just one day at a time. So this feeling of a spiritual awakening for me is happening on a daily basis, where I see the truth of now, and that is it. And as for God, God for me is truth, and as others say, God is love, and I have a feeling that they are right too. So just gently, halfway through the day, and maybe more later.